Hello and welcome to the Midlife Mentors podcast, and today we are talking about hormones.
We are. So we actually recorded this as a video live for one of our virtual retreats. If you haven't done one yet, you need to do them. They are amazing. We've been doing them during lockdown and had the most phenomenal response. But we had such a great response from this workshop, we thought we would do it as a podcast as well.
We did. You're going to hear part one here, because it was an hour long, the workshop, and then there's a part two to follow. Hope you enjoy it.
Take it.
Hi, I'm James Davis.
And I'm Claire Davis.
We're the Midlife Mentors, here to lift the lid on how to achieve health and happiness.
The balanced, no-nonsense way.
So recording this for our podcast as well. So if you're listening to this on the podcast, we are doing a live workshop on one of our virtual retreats, and we're talking about hormones.
That's why we're all over the place. Honestly, I'm going to take a snapshot of this afterwards and put this in here. Hi Simon, how are you doing? Really nice to have you here. So,
okay, I think let's get going.
Let's get going.
So hormones, what are they? What do they do? And how can we work with them? How can we start to use them to our advantage? Well, very simply put, hormones are basically chemical messengers. They travel around the body and work with organs to regulate our physiology and our behaviour. Got around 50 different hormones in the human body, and not only do they have their own roles, but they interact with each other as well. So they have a massive effect on our physique, on our emotional state, on our mental state. So it's really important to understand them. We're not going to go through like 50 today. We're going to just focus on the main ones. And so let's focus on 5 main areas. So how hormones affect us with diet and body composition, training, stress and sleep, our menstrual cycle, if we're women, obviously, and aging.
You can be forgiven for James thinking James has one around the moon. Call it PMO. We've got a house full of hormones, which I know. Yeah, we call it PMT, don't we? Pre-moon tension.
Yes. So what we're going to do is break down each of those 5 areas, look at the hormones that are involved, the key hormones that are involved, the effect of them, how we can minimise the negative effects that we perhaps don't want, and how we can work with them to get the results we do want. And given their nature, and what we said, like they do work with each other, with hormones, there's going to be overlap. So we'll keep mentioning the same hormones over and over, but in a different context. Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, because it's really interesting how everything affects everything. For women as well, I'm going to talk through, James said, the menstrual cycle. Honestly, ladies, sorry about this, guys. Ladies, you're going to find it fascinating. I've not met anyone that's not found it fascinating. And also...
It is actually fascinating. I mean... we're going to deep dive into it, but it's to do with your recovery, how hard you can train.
I thought you were going to be sarcastic then. I really thought there was going to... You sounded really too enthusiastic then about me talking about it.
It's fascinating.
I thought you were about to deliver something sarcastic. No, and then I'm going to talk about a little bit about the perimenopause and the menopause. But again, it is interesting because everything that James is going to really kind of take charge of and talk about really affects the female hormones as well. It's so it'll all make sense once we tie it all together.
And the reason these are so important is they do have a massive effect on our body, and that effect, they've got positive and negative effects like everything, but it's once we understand them, we can start to learn how to work with them rather than against them and be in harmony, which is why, in our midlife method program that some of you are watching are on, the way we coach you to train and to fuel is basically looking at optimising the performance you want to get from your hormones as we're hitting middle age.
Yeah, because it's a really tricky time because you carry on doing what you've always done and get really, really frustrated. So a lot of the time you do more, and we've talked about this before, you do more and more and more of the same thing that used to work. And then you just get incredibly frustrated, incredibly down on yourself because you're like, there must be something I'm doing wrong. I'm not working hard enough. I'm not doing this. I'm going to restrict my calories more. I'm going to do all of this stuff that might have used to have worked, but actually you're just working against your body completely at midlife. So, that's what we specialise in. But we're going to talk about everything, and it is for everyone. And yeah, what we'll do is we'll take questions at the end. So make notes, absolutely. This is going to be inside the group. Make notes, but if you've got a pen and paper, and then obviously we'll answer your questions at the end. So,
okay, let's dive in. So we're going to cover 5 main areas. First of those is basically looking at your diet and body composition. And the 2 main hormones we're going to look at here are insulin and cortisol. So insulin, we've probably all heard of it. You know, we've probably heard of it in connection with like being diabetic. Insulin basically is a hormone that we secrete to help us process the food we ingest into energy, quite simply. For those of you who don't know, the very simplified energy system for the body is we eat food, the sugars, energy is extracted from that. It goes to glucose, which is energy that's available right now for our body. What we don't need there and then is stored as glycogen in the muscles for use later. What's needed and what's not used then is stored as body fat for later, which is why if we consume too many calories, we end up putting on body fat because we're consuming energy that we're not using. It's a very, very simple equation. Lots of diets and fads will try and overcomplicate it, but the simple fact is, you know, if you consistently eat consume more energy, more calories than you expend, you will put on body fat. So what does insulin do? Well, basically it helps regulate our energy levels and supply us our energy. And so when we eat, what happens is our body will spike our insulin up to help process the food. Now, that's great, but of course every high is followed by a low. We deplete it. When we push it out, we deplete it. It's got to recharge, recover, so we get a low. And the best way of explaining this that everyone can relate to is that classic thing of getting that mid-afternoon slump. So going for the coffee, maybe a biscuit with
Chocolate hobnob.
Yeah. 20 minutes later, you're kind of like, hey, I feel great. 20 minutes after that, you feel even worse than you did before. And that's classic, the sugar in the biscuit is giving you that high insulin spike. The energy is being released very quickly, and then we're getting a massive slump afterwards. Well, why is this important? So there's a lot of research now that suggests the bigger our insulin cycle is through the day, like the higher the peaks and troughs, the more prone we are to laying down fat, particularly in abdominal areas and hips and thighs. And of course, in severe cases, what's happening is we're becoming what we call insulin resistant. So the more we're putting in high sugar, high GI, which means high glycemic index, foods that the energy can be extracted very quickly, we're spiking our insulin, dropping it down. The more we do that, we're actually numbing our insulin response. We start to become insulin resistant. Now, in severe cases, obviously, we become so resistant, we develop type 2 diabetes, which I'm sure you all know is on the rise in the UK, very closely linked with obesity. There's a lot of evidence that shows when we become more insulin sensitive, i.e. our body's more attuned to the foods we're putting in and can process the energy more effectively, not only does everything start to work more efficiently, but become less likely to lay down body fat. So far, so good. What can we do in practice to work in line with insulin? Well, first important point, there's a lot of evidence that shows the first thing we eat in the morning after we've been fasting, so when we break fast, breakfast, is going to set your bandwidth response for insulin for the rest of the day. I.e., if you get up and you have a choc chip cinnamon raisin whirl, that's going to send your insulin... I don't know. In my head it does. Send your insulin rocketing sky high. So you're basically already setting a really high bandwidth the rest of the day. And what we want to do is always start the day with a low GI variant, so low sugar. Something like our power shakes ideal. So you have oats in there. Oats are typical. It's a carbohydrate, but also high in fibre, and will release energy slowly through the day. Adding the protein powder and the healthy fats from the nut butter basically even slows down the release of energy even more, which is why 2 things happen. Number 1, the protein and fats help you feel more full. Another hormone I'm going to mention here, leptin. Leptin is your I'm full hormone. Protein and healthy fats trigger that. And actually, I can vouch for this. We went out last night and I had a swordfish kebab.
So did I.
On the plate, it did not look like much food, but swordfish is very, very dense, very high protein, and it was so filling. That's because it triggers your leptin and keeps you feeling full. So,
honestly, we had nothing else. We just had a little bit of hummus and that, and I was starving because that was late going out for us. We normally have our dinner around 6 o'clock, so it was a bit later. I was absolutely starving. Felt not going to have the bread, not going to have the pita bread and everything. Honestly, afterwards, it's like I can't eat it all. It was really, really filling, and yeah, it just kind of re-emphasises what we tell everyone, that actually that protein really does trigger that leptin and keep you full.
Yeah, exactly. So what we want to do is start the day with that low sugar snack. So we're setting our bandwidth for our insulin response low through the day, and then avoid sugar through the day. And like, that might sound easy, but those of you that have been coaching with us or one of our programs will know that
we bang on about this.
We're massively advocates of like educate yourself on food labeling, because it's easy to avoid putting a teaspoon of sugar in your tea or whatever. But there's so much hidden sugars in our foods these days, so you've got to get used to reading those labels, particularly the one on the back of the food, carbohydrates of which sugars. Now, NHS guidelines say anything above 23.5%, so 23.5 grams per 100, is a high sugar food. And you would be so surprised when you look at stuff. I've seen stuff like 30 plus grams. I mean, you're just
even
skyrocketing
bars. I'll just say this one more time. Even the bars that look healthy and have got kind of, they're gluten free, they're dairy free, they're blah 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 free, and they've got nice pretty pictures of trees on the front. They're still full of, a lot of them are still full of sugar, because that's what gives it taste.
Low sugar is defined as 5% or low, so 5 grams per 100 grams. So we'd say like try and educate yourself on those labels, and try and always get below like, I don't know, 15%, 15%. Yeah. The lower the better, in effect. We do need some sugar in our diet, but we're getting more than enough. Even if we go low sugar by educating ourselves on labels, we are still getting enough sugar in our diet.
Guys, it's also in bread. It's also in bread now. I mean, back in the day, it was never in bread. So, white bread particularly. Just check labels and just start becoming a bit more aware. Don't obsess over it, but just sugar in crisps is madness. Yeah.
Yeah. It's
I know.
in everything now. It's
on the coating of the crisps and things. It's nuts.
Yeah, the reason it's increasing is sugar is so cheap. It's really cheap, so it's a good filler, but it's also highly addictive.
Yeah.
And food manufacturers know that, so they can add more bulk to their product, so you think you're getting more, with something that's also super addictive, so you keep eating more. We'll see where this changes. Like, there's a big thing at the moment, with Corona, and we're about to start like a war on obesity. I mean, I'm not holding my breath on that.
Well, no, because it's not educating at they're saying it's educating, but it's not. It's not educating at the root cause, as far as I can see. It's basically just taking, certain advertising off at certain times. That's great, but it's still not teaching people how they can take responsibility for their health and well-being by taking out sugar from their diet. But we'll see. We'll see.
So insulin, start the day with a low sugar food, first of all, to keep your bandwidth low. Through the day, avoid high sugar foods, educate yourself on those labels. I mean, I say as a general rule of thumb, cut out as much processed, pre-packaged food as you can. Just doing that one thing alone will, over a short space of time, have an effect on your body composition in terms of bringing your fat down, just because you'll be reducing so much the sugar and becoming more insulin sensitive. So that's insulin. The other hormone that affects our body composition is cortisol, which is our stress hormone. So
anyone doing the midlife method will have, this is massive blocker to you getting results, actually. It is.
We're going to deep dive into that one a little bit more in the stress section. But what you need to know, it's basically a hormone we produce in response to stress. Sustained high levels of cortisol are closely linked, again, with a body fat gain, particularly in abdominal, hips and thighs areas. You can see a theme here. Like when we're moving to an unhealthier place in terms of our mental health or what we're ingesting, the fat is holding on in exactly the areas we do not want it. So the tip on that is just try and lower your stress levels through the day, and we are going to have that more. But there's also an interplay between insulin and cortisol, which is quite interesting. So this is where we can start to use, potentially, we're talking about cortisol in a negative way here, and insulin in a negative way, I want to keeping it down. But basically, insulin has a suppressive effect on cortisol, which is why people have like a stress response of eating, right? We get stressed, that your body, who's had that? You've been stressed, your body's like craving food, but particularly like sweet food or starchy food. That is your body saying, right, spike my insulin to bring my cortisol down. Obviously, we don't want to get into that stress response eating cycle, so being aware of it is one thing and going for the healthier options in that place. But the other way we can use it, and we're going to talk about this in a minute, is in our training. Because all training, if you're doing it right, which you should. There's no point doing it if you're not getting into some intensity, and that intensity is different for everyone, right? If you're an absolute beginner, your intensity can be very different to someone else's, but you should be, getting out of breath, sweating. All training that gets you to that level is gonna spike your cortisol because it's putting a strain on the central nervous system. And again, we'll cover this more in training. What this means is we don't want to do a prolonged training session with no fuel in us, because our cortisol is actually going to keep accelerating up as it tries to break down other tissues in the body for fuel to fuel us for that exercise. So what we can do is, when we're doing resistance training in particular, is make sure we're doing it fueled, so we have a carbohydrate source available, bring our insulin levels up and our cortisol levels down.
So that's why we always say do HIIT fasted and resistance training fueled.
Cool. So my summary: go low sugar, make sure it's low sugar start of the day, try to minimize your stress as much as you can, and make sure you're fueled for any endurance or for lifting activities. And that is diet and body composition. So obviously closely linked to that is a second area we're going to look at, which is training. So first hormone we're going to look at is human growth hormone, like the miracle hormone. It is responsible for so many amazing, great things in the body, and there's a lot of research going on at the moment about whether we can boost human growth hormone, what potential effects are in delaying aging process. Basically, human growth hormone starts to peak around our teenage years, accelerates, and then falls off and declines. It's responsible basically for growing all new tissues in the body, regeneration. It's a really key hormone, but as we age, from around mid-30s, early to mid-30s off, it's decline. And that has effects as well, which we'll cover in a sec. The second hormone we're going to look at is testosterone, obviously the male sex hormone, which has a lot of roles. In relation to training, it basically dictates, like, to a degree, how much energy you can have and how much lean muscle you can add.
Women have it too.
Yeah, women have it too. But obviously, men have it in a lot higher levels typically. And so this goes back to training. Women are sometimes afraid of lifting heavy weights, thinking, "Oh, I'll get really bulky." Well, you really need two things to get bulky. One is a good supply of testosterone. The other one is to be in a big calorie surplus all the time. Yeah. So, most women can lift heavily and won't put on bulk. They'll just become like leaner and more toned.
I can vouch for that.
But testosterone, obviously, it's responsible for maintaining our muscle. And again, for men, it declines about 1% a year from the age of 30 onwards. So it's quite, it doesn't sound a lot, but cumulatively, by the time you're hitting your 50s, your levels are a lot lower. For women, it's post-menopause. It starts to drop off really quickly as well. Now, why is this bad? Well, testosterone and human growth hormone are responsible for basically maintaining and growing new tissue, but in particular lean muscle. And again, we're going to cover this in aging, but things to know is as those two hormones decline, so our muscle mass starts to decline, which means we have lower strength and our metabolic rate drops. So the rate at which we're burning calories starts to fall because we have less muscle. Muscle is what we call metabolically active, i.e. it burns calories even at rest. The more muscle you have, the more calories you will be burning, the more you need to consume.
Can I give my fact?
You give your fact.
Okay, so I've been using weights a lot recently. I noticed my hamstrings began to bulk a little, so I've stopped using weights. We'll cover this in a minute, because actually I do have something to say around women and bulking. Yeah, I won't cover that. I'm going to cover that later, Coco, because it is true. We can bulk in certain areas.
It's genetic.
Yeah, it's
usually.
genetic. It's not actually the fact that you're lifting really heavy and stuff. What was I going to say? Yeah, so basically, 10 pounds of muscle. If you've got 10 pounds of muscle, 10 pounds of fat, your 10 pounds of fat will burn 10 calories a day. Your 10 pounds of muscle will burn 50. Massive difference.
So that is why we coach our clients to decrease body fat and add lean muscle. So we're giving you kind of the depressing side there, but it's like knowing the effects is important, because then we can figure out how to negate them. Yeah. So there's a lot of research out there that shows training, short intense bursts of cardio / HIIT will actually temporarily spike your levels of human growth hormone and testosterone. Lifting, resistance work, but particularly like heavy lifting with compound sets. This is stuff like squats, deadlift, bench press, multi-joint lifts basically, also massively spikes your human growth hormone and testosterone in those sessions. Now, there's also research that shows if you can do a cardio/HIIT session followed by a weight session, that has like kind of multiplier effect on increasing those human growth hormone and testosterone levels, which is great news. But there is a catch to this. You see, this is quite complex. We don't want to go for too long because if our baseline is here, right, and it's declining all the time as we age, we do each workout, we're coming up, back down, coming up, back down. The idea is to like train consistently, so we're keeping up here while otherwise we'd be going down here. So we keep our baseline high by regular training. If we're to do a long session, sort of plus 2 hours, what happens is we peak, but then it falls below baseline. So this is not what we want. So the good news is it's about shorter, harder sessions than long sessions. Going to bring up cortisol again, because obviously that can rise again with the long sessions. Cortisol can spike up. And high cortisol is basically going to negate what we're looking for in terms of the human growth hormone, testosterone. And not a lot of people know this, but...
not a lot of people know this.
Not a lot of people know this. Cortisol and our sex hormones, so estrogen for women, testosterone for men, are made from the same mother hormone, progesterone. So this is why, if we're stressed often, we can see effects like, fatigue, tiredness, loss of libido. It's because... that mother hormone is all its resources are going towards making the cortisol that's less available for the testosterone or the estrogen. So obviously we don't want to do those long training sessions that spike our cortisol high. And when we are doing our lifting sessions, we want to be fueled so that we're keeping that cortisol under control and allowing our testosterone to get up as much as it can.
Yay!
Yay!
Bless you love all this.
I know, love this. It's very geeky.
Oh, we'll talk through some other stuff in a minute. Stress and sleep. Let's talk about stress and sleep.
Let's talk about stress and sleep. Two massive things in the modern world, and again, very, very closely interlinked. And I said we'd be repeating, and here is our friend cortisol again.
It's the stress hormone. So obviously combined with adrenaline and a few other hormones, it was always designed to be for a short period of time. It's that fight or flight thing that we've always talked about. So for our ancestors, that was absolutely unbelievably helpful. But however, what we're doing is we're putting our body under the same kind of responses, but at a kind of like hum lower level, a constant hum. So basically our bodies are in that constant state of stress, in that constant state of producing more and more cortisol, which has significant negative implications to our emotional well-being, our mental well-being, and our physical well-being.
Yeah, so it's really interesting actually. Like Claire said, that cortisol adrenaline response, fight or flight.
Keep getting, sorry, we're having trouble playing this video. Is anyone else having any problems? Guys, can you let us know before we go on? Because we don't want to go on if anyone else is having problems. Can you let us know with a thumbs up if we're still okay? Because Rihanna's having... Sorry, we're having trouble playing this video. Is anyone else having any problems? No, fine here. Great. Can we get some feedback? No, we're fine here.
Okay.
I think we're all right.
Might be your end with your...
All fine here.
Yeah, getting
great.
lots of thumbs up. Rihanna, might be your bandwidth or something.
Yeah. But thank you for...
Thanks,
good. Thank you for alerting us, because, you just don't know, do you? Fine here, good. Okay, cool. Rihanna, sorry about that. It's a bit of a pain. Fine. Okay, thanks, guys.
Before we completely badmouth cortisol, it does have a positive role. So it's our get up and go hormone. So the normal cycle of it should be high in the morning when we wake up. It's kind of like kick-starting our system, and then it's starting to trail off the day. So it should look like this. You go up, and then trail through the day down. What we're doing in modern life, though, is getting up, and then accelerating up.
Yeah.
Going back to the fight or flight, it's designed to be a very short, specific response to get us out of trouble.
Yeah.
Neuroscience tells us that our minds, our subconscious, can't tell between an actual threat and a perceived threat in terms of our physiological response. So, you might not be faced by a tiger on a rampage in everyday life, but that email that pops in your inbox, that in your head, it's a similar threat, and you get the same stress response to it.
Do you mind me just saying some of the physiological stuff that goes on, or are you going to talk about that in a
second?
No,
you talk about
so, basically it was designed to shut down the non-essential processes in our body. So that fight or flight response, would shut down. It would take all the blood to our muscles. It would take... basically, it would shut down our digestive system almost completely, because it needs to... focus on the fear and the task ahead, basically, to run away from the saber-toothed tiger. So our immune system drops, our guts basically goes into basically shut down, which is where IBS comes from. So over a long period of time, this is where IBS has kind of originated from. It's a lot of stress. Can I access the video later? Yes, of course you can. Of course you can. Even to the point over a long period of time where actually for women, our menstrual cycle will be affected as well. So that's some of the physiological effects of long-term stress that was originally a great idea because it just got us focused on what we needed to deal with. But over time, these are some of the health implications we're getting, especially in the immune system. It really, I did a video on this the other day on my Facebook, really suppresses the immune system. Like that kind of stress and fear and anxiety.
Oh, which reminds me, I actually read this morning, just reminded me, an ancient story from ancient India about a time when the plague was going around. And there's an old man sitting on a tree, and the spirit of the plague goes past him. The old man says, "Where are you going?" He goes, "I'm going to the next town to kill 100 people." The man hears that 10,000 people died in that town, and the spirit of the plague comes back. And the man says, "You lied. You said you're only going to kill 100. The spirit of the plague says, "I did only kill 100. Fear killed the rest." It does have a massive effect, and it makes your body hold on to fat. So what we need to do is look at ways of reducing our stress through the day. And obviously, if we are stressed, that can have an implication to our sleep patterns as well. Now,
I'm going to talk about this with women as well. Perimenopause and menopause and the sleep being affected by that, which all links around.
All links together. Stress and sleep. So sleep, even a few minutes, this is amazing research, even a few minutes of missed sleep is equivalent to your next day's performance of a heavy night's drinking. Multiple studies have shown this. Even a few minutes sleep massively impairs your performance the next day. And I'm sure we've all had those nights where we haven't got a lot of sleep and the next day everything is a struggle, which then of course increases your stress levels as well. So there's a cycle there. Now, what can we do about it? Well, for the stress side, we want to be looking at ways we can mitigate stress in our lives. So if there's what we call external factors, look at whether we can remove those external factors.
Yeah, we talked about some of these yesterday, didn't we, with Zoe, actually?
We basically have external stressors and internal stressors. External is stuff from the outside world that affects us. Always going to, but if there's something consistently, can we remove it or find a different strategy for dealing with it that reduces our stress? Internal stressors are things we create in our head, like worry. Again, recognise we control our reaction to things and look at different strategies to shift that. Same goes for sleep. You're not going to sleep as well if you're stressed, but here's another big hormone for sleep, melatonin. Melatonin is a hormone produced by the pineal gland. At night, it gets you ready to sleep. It's part of our natural circadian rhythm, which is our waking sleeping cycle. Blue light, which is the light thrown off by all electronic devices, actually interrupts your melatonin production. So, in terms of sleep and stress, because often what we see on our devices is going to stress us out, is try to switch off all your devices at least 1 hour before bedtime. I'd suggest 2, because that will have effect. Or you can even get some blue light blocking glasses, but still do switch off at least an hour before.
James has got some. James has got some now, and you look very handsome in them.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
You've been listening to the Midlife Mentors with Claire and James Davis.
We'd love to hear from you, so drop us a line at info@themidlifementors.com with any questions or topic suggestions.
And make sure you join us on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. You can find us under the Midlife Mentors.
Yeah.